Nixa, Republic, Dream Center, Springfield. I hope that never gets old. Like, I hope that you can see that and you're reminded, like, these are the good old days, that we get a front row seat as seeing lives being changed. And it's incredible because we got to see kids and students and young adults and adults. I think at Republic we had Chase. He's like 9 years old. And then I think our oldest is like 79 years old. And what's so cool is this. I hope you're reminded, you're never too young to take a next step for Jesus. And you are never too old to take a next step for Jesus. And you are never too early to take a next step for Jesus. And you are never too late to take a next step for Jesus. You are never too far gone to say yes to God doing something in you and through you. And so across our campuses, as you have a seat, can you give it up one more time for those that went public with their faith? How cool is that? So I know that like you see the number 71, but what's even cooler than stats is stories. And I would be remiss if you walked out of here without hearing any stories. And it's been cool. We got to see here at Springfield some brothers that serve on our connections team. They got baptized. You got to see some group leaders get baptized. We had some on our Saturday night that are part of a sober living community that got baptized. It's so cool. And one of the things that sticks out to me is at our Dream Center campus, okay, part of our Dream Center. I've got a picture here, a picture where like 9 years ago when the Dream Center was being built, and some of you may be like, what's the Dream Center? It is Monday through Friday, Help and Hope, and I'll walk through that in a moment. But 9 years ago when the Dream Center was started, this picture was put in the lobby. It was almost like wallpaper on the wall. And so you've got Mother Teresa Jody right here, okay? And then you got Gracie and you got baby Biggie. And 9 years ago when the Dream Center was started, it started with a dream that they wouldn't just be help for today, that it wouldn't just be how do we meet a practical need. Now that's awesome and let's do that. But what would it also look like to be hope for tomorrow? What would it also look like if it wasn't just meeting the needs people had now, but saying, how do we walk with families and provide holistic help and partner with them? And say it's more than just physical help, it's mental, emotional, it's spiritual. And here's the cool thing is I got another picture. 9 years later, that's baby Biggie getting baptized. Is that incredible? Like, I'm so proud of our Dream Center and the work that they do, the way they partner with families. I'm so proud of our Dream Center campus and the way that they champion families and care for them and love them. It's a beautiful thing. I'm totally gonna get to the message, all right? But I got one more story for you. This is the last baptism, the last service here at the Springfield campus. We had a guy named David, and David was getting baptized. And he called me the week before. He's like, hey, I just got a couple questions. I want to talk to somebody. I was like, okay, sounds good. So we're talking, and David's like, I'm excited to get baptized. I'm like, well, we're excited that you're getting baptized. And he's like, well, one little thing is I'm paralyzed from the waist down. And I went into fix-it mode. I'm like, well, we can figure it out. Okay, we can pour water over you. We can do all that stuff. He's like, John, I'm going to stop you there. I want to get in that tank. And I'm like, if you want to get in that tank, you're going to get in that tank. And so we, very last service, very last baptism, we had a bunch of guys over here. I think eventually Taiwo, okay, he used to play for the Lunkers, a big old guy. He just picks him up, gets him in there. And then when he gets in the tank, I got him on one side. Our student pastor, Kyron, he's barely helping me on the other side. Okay, and I'm just kidding. I was barely helping him, okay? But we baptized David. And it was such a symbolic moment because one, nobody got in that tank alone. That's not how that works. No one walked in that tank out of their own discipline, out of their own design, out of their own, intentionality. That's not how that works. That was a lot of prayer for some people. That was a lot of people praying for them. That's a mama that was praying for somebody that got in that tank. And David was just a physical representation of how none of us got in that tank alone and none of us followed Jesus alone. That's not how that works. And so spiritually, all of us got in the tank that way. Like through a lot of help, through a lot of prayer, through a lot of sacrifice. And what I want to let you know today is I don't care what habit you got. I don't care what hurt you got. I don't care what hang up you got. I don't care what addiction is running your life. I don't care what disability you feel like you got. You got a God that's chasing after you, and he's crazy about you. And I got some good news for you. You may be sitting out here today in the middle of your mess, and you might feel far from God. You might be at our Dream Center campus or our Republic campus or our Nixon campus, and you're sitting out there and you're walking in and you feel like you feel out of place in an environment like this because you don't have your life put together and you feel far from God. I want to remind you that you are closer than you think if you just obey. If God is speaking to you, if he's saying something, if you start reading his words and you just say, yeah, okay, I'll do that. You are closer to God than you think if you just obey. For real. Now, here's the bad news. I don't care what your Bible reading streak is. And I don't care if you've been to North Point the last 52 weekends out of 52 weekends and you're just on it and you got it. If God is speaking to you and you've been delaying what he's been saying to you, if you've been reading his words and you're like, oh, maybe I'll get to it tomorrow, you might be further from God than you think if you delay. But here's the good news, is that you might be closer to God than you think if you obey. And so, all the time in our lives, a lot of times we've got this chiasm, this chasm, this gap between us obeying and us delaying, and us obeying and us delaying. And even this week, we've been walking through this series where we're walking through every single book of the Bible. We're going through every single one, and we're saying, where is Jesus? Where's the heart and the character of Jesus in each one of these books? And so even today, we're walking through the book of Haggai, and Haggai is a prophet, which just means a mouthpiece from God, who came to speak to a nation of people that at one point in time obeyed God, but over time they kept delaying and delaying and delaying what God had told them to do, until ultimately they weren't being disobedient necessarily, they were just distracted and they diminished God from their life. Thank you. Thank you for the rocks. And so here's the deal. A lot of times this can be our life, where in our life, we're not bad. We're not bad people, but we get distracted. And over time, God gets diminished in our life. Because here's the deal. We got a lot of things that we got to make room for. We do. We got to make room for our kids' sports schedules, and we got to make room for our exercise and our health, and we got to make room for beating ourselves up over that thing that we said 3 months ago, and that consumes our mind and our energy and our time. And we got to make room for researching products on Amazon that we don't really need, but I'm still going to spend 45 minutes and read every review. Okay, we got to make room for our finances. We've got to make room. We make room. We got to make room for our inbox and all the things that take so much time out of our day. We got to make room for it. And all of a sudden, what easily happens is we make room for all these things, and then God gets whatever room we got left. And sometimes that's not very much. And other days, he gets some room, but we just don't really feel like it. And so this is where the nation of Israel was at. They weren't bad people. They weren't walking around being like, "Hail Satan!" Okay, they weren't killing people and hiding the bodies. They weren't, they weren't doing and smoking and sleeping with whoever they wanted. That's not what was going on. They were actually pretty moral people. You'd look at them on the outside and you'd be like, "Wow, that's they got their life put together." But they had their life so put together that they ended up forgetting about God. Because they had their own life, they had their own career, they had their own goals, their own ambitions. And they just, they didn't think about God throughout their day. And so God sent a prophet, Haggai, to speak to this group of people. Super relatable. And what he did was, here's what he says. He says, "Is it time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house, God's house, remains in ruin?" And you might be like, what does that mean? Okay, let me back it up, okay? So 70 years ago, the nation of, really is Judah, southern half of Israel, what had happened is they got conquered. And when someone conquers your land, what they do is they tear down your temple. It's almost like your God wasn't that strong. It's like making fun of you almost. And so what happened was their temple got destroyed and they got exiled, which means they had to exit their land. So they got conquered by the Babylonians. They had to exit their land and go live in a foreign land where they were in captivity. They were in slavery. And then while they were there, the Babylonians got conquered by the Persians. So now they've got a new they're held captive by a new land or a new king. And their life is weird. They're like, we don't know what to do. We don't know where we're going. We don't know how we're ever going to make it back home. And so what happened is God became a pretty big part of their life. He started turning back to the God that promised them things. And they started leaning on those promises. And they're like, okay, we're going to follow you. And what happened is there's a guy named Daniel. Maybe you've heard Daniel in the lion's den. You ever heard that? That Daniel, who ended up getting a lot of influence with the king of Persia. And what happened was the king of Persia, he convinced the king of Persia to let the Israelites return back home to build the temple. And so King Cyrus said, yes, I'll allow that. Not only will I allow that, I'll actually fund it, which is like a crazy answer to prayer. Isn't that cool? And so Israelites started coming back home, and they started like living in the land again. They started building their own economy and society, and things started going well, and they built their own houses. And after 16 years, guess what still wasn't built? The temple. And they had all the permission and they had all the funding, but they had none of the urgency. And so God sends Haggai to go and speak to this nation. And that's what he said. He said, is it time now for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while God's house sits in ruin? Which, this isn't like an anti-paneling message, okay? I don't care the decorations in your house or what that looks like. That's not the point of this, all right? I don't care about the paneling, all right? But what happened was these people got so caught up in their own life that they forgot about God. And here's the scary part about our own life, is that if we want to live our life without God, he'll let us. And that's a scary thing. Because God isn't going to bust into your schedule and make you pay attention to him. He's not going to break into your day and demand that you spend time with him. He'll let you build the business. He'll let you chase the relationships. He'll let you order your day however you want. He'll let you spend your finances however you want. He'll let you do that. And you may even experience some success in that. But here's what ends up happening, is you might have a busy schedule and you might still feel like you have an empty heart. And everything might look good on the outside for a time. You might realize that you're missing something on the inside. And so Haggai comes to warn the people, you've been spending too much time. I know you're not doing anything bad. I know you're not trying to burn down the city. You're just remodeling your kitchen. And you ain't been thinking about God. And there might be some of you in here that's like, wow, 16 years, I can't believe they didn't do the one thing that they came back home to do. But before you get all judgy McJudgerson on them, okay, let me ask you a question. How many of you have an unfinished project at your house? Okay, I see some hands in Springfield. How many of you have a wall you need to paint, okay? How many of you had a temporary fix you made in 2019 and it's still there, all right? How many of you, Nixa, how many of you still have your Christmas lights up? All right, shame on you. I can't believe it. If you're going to judge them, I'm going to judge you, all right? But that's common. Things happen, deadlines happen, and you've got things that are more important and more urgent. You've got matters that just take up your time, and you've got things going on in your life that it's easy to forget about the thing that you really wanted to do. At one point in time, you were super motivated, and then over time, you kind of forgot about it because life gets busy. And so Haggai pulls everybody together, and he's like, if you're not careful, this is what your life's going to be like. He says, give careful thought to your ways. Because right now, you've just been living however you want. Give careful thought to your ways. You have planted much, but you harvest little. You eat, but you never have enough. You drink, but you never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages. I like this part. You earn wages only to put them in a purse with holes in it. Sometimes I feel like that's what happens with my wages, okay? But you're working twice as hard and you ain't getting the results. And you've been leaning on your own design, on your own disciplines, on your own intentionality. And I don't care how much self-help books you've read, okay? You are missing a pretty foundational element when it comes to your life. And so what happens is you can be wildly successful, but spiritually unfinished. And so here's what Haggai says. He says, pay attention to your ways, right? Take careful note of your ways. I wrote it down this way, is that to pay attention to what you pay attention to. Pay attention to what you pay attention to. I know that's a mind twister right there. Okay, really think about that. Think about what you think about, okay? Pay attention to what you pay attention to. Because here's what you're going to find, is there's a lot of things that are fighting for your attention. Even right now, you feel a buzz and you got to check it, okay? You know you got a package that's coming in 3 hours, and so I got to check when is that coming. Your stomach starts growling, and you're like, I wonder what I'm going to eat for lunch, Your watch is ticking, and did I close all my rings today? Even right now, there are things that are fighting for your attention. Well, of course, that's normal. And here's what I want you to do. Pay attention to what you pay attention to. Because here's what you might find. That you pay a lot of attention to things that don't matter. And when you pay attention to things that don't matter, oftentimes you stop paying attention to the few things that do matter. And I don't want you to be the type of person where you're at home, you're thinking about work, and when you're at work, you're thinking about vacation, and when you're on vacation, you're just thinking about the next vacation, and you're never here. I don't want to be the kind of person that only thinks about their kids when they make me mad. I don't want to be the kind of person that only thinks about my parents when they end up in the hospital and something's wrong. I don't want to be the person that only thinks about my life and my existence and how fragile my time is when I end up in the hospital. I don't want to be that kind of person that just works to make money, and I spend all my time doing that only to end up in the hospital to then pay all my money to hopefully get back some time so that then I can work. I'm like, what are we doing with our lives? And if you don't stop for a moment and pay attention to what you pay attention to, all of a sudden you might cut out some of the most important things in your life. And that's what Haggai is coming to tell the nation of Israel to do. Stop, consider your ways. In fact, here's how I want you to direct your attention. This is what he says. He says, go up into the mountains, bring down timber, and build my house. He's like, that thing that I've been telling you, that God's been telling you to do, that you've been delaying? Go do that. So that I may take pleasure in it and be honored, says the Lord. And here's what I find. For you, you may read that and you're like, okay, should I go get some timber in the mountains, bring it back down, and build a house for God? No, he doesn't need that. All right. I know, tempting, though. Oftentimes, when you read a book like Haggai is the second smallest book in the Old Testament, okay? It's literally 2 chapters. I could have started reading it at the beginning of my message, and I'd be done with it by now. And then we could all go home. Some of you wish I did that. I'm sorry. But it's that short. But oftentimes when there's a small book in the Bible, it's packed full. Every single word has intentionality to it. And so what he's saying that thing that you've been delaying, that thing that God's been telling you to do and you ain't been doing it, now's the time to do it. Start redirecting your attention to him. And when you do that, here's what it does. It says, I'm going to take pleasure in it, and it will bring me honor. I will be honored. That word honor is a unique word. I hear it all the time in Scripture, honor your father and mother, honor one another. Maybe you've heard, honor me, and I'll honor you. And sometimes you can say a word so many times, honor, that you're like, what does that even mean? And so the word honor, if you look at it in Hebrew, which is the language that the Old Testament was written in, it reads kavod. And what kavod translates to is heavy or weighty. When something has honor, it carries weight. When your words have honor, your words carry weight. When someone is someone of honor, their presence carries weight. It is heavy. You have to account for the space that they take. You have to account for the space that they make. So when something has honor, it means that it's heavy and that it's weighty. And so oftentimes, here's what I found in our spiritual life, is that we want to honor God, but we don't exactly always know how to do that. And I've got these rocks over here, and I know like these look like a science fair project. They don't look like, they look like styrofoam, but I promise you, like they're not. Okay, I can hit these puppies. They're solid. They are they are rocks, and they are heavy. So when you see me struggling, just know I ain't faking it. I'm not that good of an actor, all right? But oftentimes, here's what we do. Whenever we go through something hard, whenever we're going through something in our life, oftentimes that's the time that we begin to give God more weight in our life than maybe we've ever given him before. When we encounter a struggle, when something is difficult, what we do is we decide, hey, God, I'm going to give you some weight. And so we take this ball, okay, this rock, and we say, God, okay, you got some weight in my life. And so what happens is we begin to read the Bible, and we start reading his words, and we find out that hits. Some of the words, some of the verses, oh my word, that's exactly what I needed today. And you begin to read and you begin to obey. You begin to say yes, and it starts to do something in your life because you've given God some weight. And whoa. And then when you're laying in bed at night, instead of just doom scrolling or doing different things, you begin to talk to God. And instead of just spiraling out of control on all the difficult things in your life, you begin to talk to him and you begin to give him more weight. And then when you're driving to work in the morning, instead of just filling it with noise and podcasts and self-help books or murder crime podcasts or what, I don't know what you listen to. Instead of doing that, you turn off the radio and you try to listen to what he wants to tell you. And what you're doing over time is you're giving God more weight in your life. You're giving him more honor in your day. And when things are tough, when things are hard, you begin to give God more weight. But what happens is over time, things get a little easier. And your schedule gets, I gotta drop that thing. Okay. Your schedule clears up. Relationships begin to mend. Your bank account ain't screaming anymore. And as things begin to get lighter in your life, you begin to make God a little bit lighter in your life. You're like, oh, this isn't too bad, okay? And so all of a sudden, his words become a little more optional. Because, it's not that big of a deal. Prayers become more occasional. Worship becomes background noise. And it's not that you're mad at God. You're not a bad person. You're not evil, right? You're not rejecting him. You're just dismissing some of his words, diminishing him out of your life. He begins to be a little bit lighter. And when things pop up in your schedule, you just, I just move them around. And I'll go do what I want to do, and then this came, I got to go do this, okay? And you just move him around, because it's not that big. He doesn't carry that much weight. And then at the end of your day, you realize you're he becomes more and more thoughtless in your life. You know the opposite of honor? It's thoughtlessness. And I don't know how many times you've been able to go throughout your day and you didn't think about God once. I've had many days like that. And what I realized is I was actually doing the opposite of honoring God. He's pretty thoughtless. Why? Because he didn't carry much weight in my day. And this is what happened to the Israelites. What happened is when they were in captivity, when they were taken over, they're like, God. God became very important to them. God carried some weight. They were praying to him. They were crying out to him. They're like, God, you're our only option. We need you to show up. And God answered their prayer, and they were able to return back home. And then once they returned back home and things were good, they gave him a little less weight because their life became a little bit better. And they're not bad. They just forgot about him. And so how do you do this? What does this look like in our life? And there's a verse in Matthew. And this is Jesus talking about how to honor him, how to honor God. In Matthew 6:33, it says, seek first his kingdom, seek first his righteousness, and everything else will be given to you. And a lot of times we do it a little bit different. A lot of times we seek everything that we want, and then we try to fit God into our day with the smallest bit of weight that we can give him. And so what this is saying is seek first his kingdom, seek first his righteousness. What would it look like to make him first? And so a lot of times what we do in our day is we try to put him first. We give him some weight. And we say, God, okay, I want to make you first. I want to give you some weight. And we end up going back and forth, depending on how good our life is, depending on how busy our life is, depending on what stage of life we're in. And it's this back and forth and back and forth. And there's an acronym that I learned when it comes to seek first. I learned this in Sunday school. I'm giving it to you today, okay? This helps me remember. What does it look like to put God first? And there's an acronym of first. So the F stands for finances. The I stands for interests. The R stands for relationships. The S stands for schedule. And the T stands for troubles. How do I put God first in these areas? And you may look at that list, and that's daunting. You're like, so God's got to be first in all of these? Like, that is a lot. And even as a pastor, I look at that, and I'm like, how in the world am I going to juggle that? Like, God, how do I put you first in all those? And so what we end up doing is we end up, like, picking an area of our life, and we try to make God first. Like, okay, God, I want you to be first in my finances. So what I'm going to give you is I'm going to try to be generous first. God, I'm going to give your words some weight in my life, and I'm going to try to do that, and I'm going to attempt to do that. And then things get a little bit harder. Yeah, I don't know, like money becomes tight, and now I'm like, well, God, I'm going to give you what I can give you, okay? I'm going to do my best. I'm going to try my best, and like this is me giving it, I'm going to give it to you first. Sometimes that comes with our interests, where, I don't know, sometimes I live a life of what I would rather. And sometimes I don't want to wake up and read the Bible. Sometimes I don't want to go for a walk and pray, and I'd rather call a friend instead, or I'd rather, watch a show on Netflix, or I'd rather sleep in, and so this is what we do in our life. We hit moments of emotional strength where we're like, no, nope, God, I'm giving you this weight. And we go on a streak. We've got like 3 weeks straight of waking up at 5 a.m. reading the Bible, and it's awesome. And I gave God some weight. And then you sleep in and you miss it one time. And you're like, okay, when I can, I'll do it. And a lot of times that's how we live our life. It doesn't make you bad. You're not evil. You're just human, right? And you're trying hard. A lot of times when it comes to our relationships, we say, God, we even say it. We say, God, I want you to be a part of my relationship. And so what we do is we give him a part. And we start off strong, and we're like, babe, let's pray together in bed, Let's really start some rhythms and some things that center our relationship on God. That would be good. I'm getting out of breath here, okay? Obviously, physical health isn't something I've given a lot of weight to. But we do this with our relationships. We're like, God, I'm going to give you, okay, here we go. And we make him a part of our relationships. And then things start going bad, and we're like, no, okay, I almost set that down, not gonna. Picking that back up. He needs to be a big part of it. And relationships become heavy over time. We do this with our schedule. So many times we give God a piece of our schedule, and we move him around, and we move him around, and we move him around. And even if he's our first, a lot of times what can happen is he gets, he just, however we can fit it in, because we got a lot of things on our schedule. We've got meetings that hit our calendar. We've got games and practices that hit our calendar. We've got things that are already set in stone. And so God can kind of, he kind of move around. And sometimes, don't tell anybody, I get to the end of my day and I realize I was so busy, I didn't even fit God in. And it's one thing to say, God, I'm sorry, I was too busy today. It's another thing to say, God, you weren't a priority in my life today. And we do that with our troubles. Like, sometimes things are hard, but it's not until we get that diagnosis or that doctor's report where we're like, let me pick up the Bible and see what it has to say. And those things aren't bad, but here's what you end up doing. You end up living the kind of life where you always feel a little guilty, you always feel a little shameful, you always feel like you're not enough, you always feel like you have to do more. You keep juggling these things back and forth, you keep trying to give God more weight, and then things get hard,
okay, I got to give you even more weight, and things get a little bit easier, and then you kind of forget about him a little bit. And it's this back and forth. It's a cycle that we keep going in a circle on. And a lot of times, this is why our faith doesn't feel very strong. This is why we oftentimes feel so much guilt and shame about our life. But when Haggai talks about honor, he talks about a different kind of weight. It's not this like back and forth of giving him some weight. It's a different kind of weight. It's this one, okay? And I'm even going to try to lift this one, okay? Like this one, I think Caleb Thomas had to bring this one out with Jordan, okay? Like I can, this thing is solid, okay? This thing is so set that it has a different kind of weight than these two. It has so much weight that I don't move it, I move around it. That's different. A lot of times what we've been trying to do in our faith is we've been trying to give God some weight, and then maybe we give him more weight. And then we give him some weight, and then we give him more weight. What if you had a different kind of faith? What if your kind of faith was, no, I start with you, and instead of whatever you got left in my day, what if we started here and we built around here? What if God started our schedule, and then we built around that? He's set in stone, and then we build. What if from our relationships, it starts here and then we build around? Because here's what I found. The life that you live depends on the weight that you give. The life that you live depends on the weight that you give. And when you give God this kind of weight, he gives your life a different kind of weight. And here's what I found is oftentimes the heaviest thing in my life, that's my God. I don't love saying that. But if your kids are the heaviest thing in your life, they're your gods. And if your finances are the heaviest thing in your life, that's your God right now. And if your comfortability is the heaviest thing in your life, then comfort's your God. And if success is the heaviest thing in your life, then success is your God. What would it look like for God to be God? And instead of moving him around wherever it fits in your life, what if it's his day and you moved around it? You scheduled around it, you built around it, you planted around it. That would be a different kind of life. And when it says that his yoke is easy and his burden is light, a lot of times when we try to fit him in, he feels pretty heavy. And I'm not saying this is simpler or easier, but he is light in this moment because I don't have to carry it. It's his day, and I build around it. I don't try to juggle him, and I don't try to move him around. That's a different kind of life. And you may be sitting out here today, and you might be making a decision of like, I want to do that. God, I want to put you first, and not in a way that I'm just juggling weight back and forth, but I want to actually build my life around you. I want to build my schedule around you. I want to build my finances around you. I want to build my interests around you. I want to build my relationships around you. I want to build, when I encounter troubles, you aren't my last resort, you're my first option. God, I want that. And so many times we can make that decision in our heart, and I've sat where you sat, and I've done that, and I'm like, yes. And then tomorrow, nothing changes in my life. And I was motivated for a moment, but then I just kind of like forgot. There wasn't a lot of honor, it was a lot of thoughtlessness. So I got a question for you. If there's 5 frogs on a log and 3 decide to jump, how many are still on that log? You nailed it. In Springfield, somebody said 5. Nixa. I hope you didn't get it though. Okay. Everyone on Saturday said 2, and I was like, yes. Okay, here's what it is. Just because 3 decided to jump didn't mean they did. All right? And so many of you might be sitting out here today, and you're like, I want to do that. And then you go home, and your life looks the same. It's hard. It's not easy. Like, I'm literally telling you to change your life. That's not easy, but at the same time, you don't do it alone. And it takes one step. It takes one step of obedience, and you're closer to God than you think. In fact, one small step can create a ripple effect in your life. If you take one small step, as one one yes to God can make a huge impact. One small key can open up a big door. One small moment can create a giant memory. And when it comes to your life, what would it look like to take one small step and let it create a ripple effect in your life? And here's what I've found. When it comes to Haggai, you might have excuses. The nation of Israel had some excuses. They're like, God, if we build this temple, it's just not going to be as good as the one before. And God was like, I don't care. In fact, this is what he said. He said, actually, the glory of this present house, the one that you're building, the glory of this present house will be greater than the glory of the former house, says the Lord Almighty. And in this place, I will grant peace. And this is what we find. Where is Jesus in Haggai? Well, in Haggai, Jesus is our greater glory. He's our greater glory. Some of you, your life might be a hot mess right now. You might be in your second marriage and you might be going through a divorce again. Some of you might be in the middle of addiction and you're trying to get out of it and you're rebuilding your life. Like some of you may be coming out of bankruptcy and you got nothing put together financially and you don't even know how you're going to do it. Some of you're restarting your life at 40 and you're learning a brand new job and you're like, what in the world is AI and how do I use it, okay? And you're like, I don't even know. Like some of you may feel that way. That is actually a perfect time to say, God, I'm going to put you first and I'm going to build my life around you. And oftentimes when you do that, here's what he does. He gives you a greater glory. And you're like, yeah, but the old one was a lot better. I was a lot more put together then. He's like, I don't care. Give me what you got. And there's a blessing that comes with that. And this isn't like a name it, claim it. This isn't like, you write a check and you're going to get tenfold back. Okay, that would be called a transaction. And we don't treat God like a transaction. That's not that. But there is a biblical principle where there's a blessing when you say, God, I'm going to build my life from you. I'm going to start with you first, and from there, I'm going to work. And that takes some work on your end. That's not easy. But with God's help, you can do it. And there's a blessing that comes with that. And what's fascinating is this is one of the only times in Scripture where a prophet came to a nation and spoke, and the nation was like, okay. They're like, I actually think he's right. In fact, this is what it says. It says, and the whole remnant of the people obeyed the voice of the Lord their God and the message of the prophet Haggai, because the Lord their God had sent him, and the people feared the Lord. And fear of the Lord is not like they were scared of God. It was all of a sudden, instead of aligning with their own desires, they aligned with God's desires. Instead of aligning with their own thinking, they aligned to God's thinking. And so what happened is they obeyed. You know what happens when you obey? You're closer to God than you think. They stopped delaying what God was telling them, and they obeyed. And you don't need a preacher to tell you this next part. In fact, the nation of Israel didn't need a prophet to tell them this next part. Is that you got a God. God doesn't want a house. He wants a heart. The book of Haggai is not about people coming together to build something. That's not the book. There's a lot of talk about building a temple, yes, but it's never been about the temple. It's not about how great and how grand and how much and how more you can give God. That's not the thing. He doesn't need more, he just wants you. He doesn't need a house, he just wants your heart. He doesn't need you to be like, okay, let me give you more weight and more weight. Can I carry it all? He's like, drop it, let it go, and build from here. That's a different kind of life. And when you give God that kind of weight in your life, he gives your life a different kind of weight. And so what I want to do is I want to pray. I want to pray that we'd have the courage, the boldness, the clarity to say, God, where do I start? And how do I put you first and build around you? Across our campuses, would you pray with me? God, I don't know what's heavy in our life right now. I don't know if it's a kid. I don't know if it's our finances. I don't know if it's a diagnosis. I don't know if it's a problem. I don't know if it's a fear. I don't know if it's a conflict that we have. But God, whatever feels heavy, I pray that we drop it. Like in this moment right now, that we'd let you carry that. You're better at that than we are. And we've been trying to be God over our life and figure this thing out and maybe introduce you from time to time, but this would be a moment right here, right now, where we say, God, I'm going to stop carrying that. I'm giving you the weight in my life, and I'm going to build around that. I just believe you're going to bless it. I believe you're going to guide me. I believe you're going to put the right people in my corner to be able to do that. And whatever feels heavy, God, I pray that across this room, across our campuses, that would begin to feel light. There's very real problems. There's very real troubles that we're going to encounter. But God, I just believe you're bigger than them. And I pray that you'd make that abundantly clear in our lives today. In your name, amen.